Thanks for listening to the Swearing In podcast, where you'll hear the origin stories of those who chose to serve. So ground your gear, take a seat, and listen up. The Swearing In podcast starts right now.
Hello and welcome. I am Marty Smith, and this is a Swearing In podcast. My guest today is former Navy Petty Officer Second Class Steven Leapley. Steven grew up in the Midwest and went to high school in St. Charles, Illinois. After graduating, he joined the Navy and went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center in 1991. He became a corpsman and attended A school at Great Lakes. His first assignment was to the medical center at Great Lakes. His next assignments were to Guam, Mare Island in California, and then to San Diego. He left the military on September 4th, 2001. Steven currently owns and operates Leapley Enterprises LLC, where his specialty is ghostwriting. Now this concludes your pre-brief, so let's get on with the interview. Steven, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks for having me.
I always forget the former. Yeah, you got to be careful with the Marines. You know, you can never say
once a Marine, always
prior
a
Marine. Yeah, I know they're pretty. They're pretty. I'm sure you ran into those guys too. So, Steven, where'd you grow up at?
I'm a Midwestern boy, born and raised. I was born in Ohio, and then between birth and fourth grade, we went Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois. So I grew up from fourth grade on, basically I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago.
Why did you move around so much?
And then let's see, my dad's job. So my dad, we moved to Indiana because my parents wanted to get away from their parents. And then,
smart. Yeah, that's smart.
My dad had a really good job in Indiana, and then a company wooed him to Michigan. And we got to Michigan. We were there for 9 months, and they gave him a raise and a deal that he couldn't refuse to go to the place where he absolutely didn't want to go, which was Chicago.
Yeah, sure.
And so it got us into the suburbs of Chicago, and that's where we stayed until I joined the Navy. And then I joined the Navy, and you know how they say, join the Navy and see the world. I think it was
right.
Mine was join the Navy and see Great Lakes. So I went to boot camp. My A school and my first duty station were all Great Lakes. So I was
you're kidding.
It was. I was like, woohoo! This is gonna be fun.
Right.
Oh.
Well, let's back up. Let's go. So where'd you go to high school at then?
St. Charles is a western suburb of Chicago. It's kind of a far west, like directly west of Chicago.
Oh, okay.
And it's recently been made famous because Donnie Wahlberg and his wife moved there.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh. So. Interesting. I was gonna say your suburbs of Chicago. That's all. That John Hughes made a whole career out of directing movies in the suburbs of Chicago, right?
Oh yes. And they're all my favorite movies, and I've been to all the locations. And
really,
and yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like we had senior skip day, and most of us wore the Ferris Bueller berets.
Right.
We had a lot of fun doing that.
How did the military come about for you then?
So, originally I had no desire to join the Navy, strictly because my dad was in the Navy. We didn't have a bad relationship, but I was just like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I don't want to.
Sure. Right.
And so, but my uncle was in the Marine Corps, and he was my hero. Growing up, he taught me about music. He taught me how to play drums. Like he was, whenever we went there, like he was just my hero.
Yeah.
And so I remember being a kid, and I would take his, in the military, we get those, when you graduate boot camp, you get the boot camp book, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so he graduated 76 from boot camp, from Marine boot camp. And so he had like 10 copies of his boot camp book at the time. And so he got one for, everybody in the family. Yeah. And so we had one, and I used to take that thing and I would try to recreate the obstacle course in my backyard. So just so I could try to be like him.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to join the Marine Corps. I had originally I kind of was like, I want to be a lawyer. I think that would be kind of cool. But then, and at the time that I was joining, he was a recruiter in Detroit. And so I was like, oh, wow, that'd be really cool if he could recruit me in the military. That would be amazing. Yeah. And so I went in there and we started talking, and for the longest time, for like 3-4 months, as I was talking to the recruiter, it was going to be perfect. He was going to be able to get his name and everything on it. The recruiter in Chicago was going to recruit me, but my uncle was his name. It was so, back in the days before
trying to get him credit, basically, right?
Yeah. Yes. And then like at the last minute, this guy was like, nope, your uncle's not doing it. He's not getting credit for it. It's going to be me. And I was like, I'm out. I got up, walked out of the office. He goes, you can't leave. I'm like, I haven't signed anything yet. I'm 18, or 17. Nice. Like, like I was like, I'm out of here. And I walked out, took a deep breath, walked right into the Navy recruiting office. And
isn't that the thing?
That's
why they got all 4 of those guys together.
Yes.
Because people get mad at one and go join another. So I think they're in cahoots. So
I think so. So I walked in, and the other thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to be a radio disc jockey. That was like my dream goal, was to be like a morning radio DJ, in a major city, and just like,
oh wow, how did that come about?
Music. I think my uncle just like, I loved music and was always listening to music, and just, I don't know, I started DJing when I was a kid. And just,
it's kind of nice to be doing in control of the music. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it was also back to my uncle, because he had the old like Pioneer music component music system that he bought in Okinawa. Oh yeah, in the 70s.
Yeah, right.
And like and so like the 8-track player and the reverb, like all this stuff. And so it was like
the whole equalizer.
We
and everything.
Would sit down in his. Yes. Oh yes. I mean, we would sit. I see them all on eBay, and that's my next goal, is to buy all those for me. It's just for that.
Go back to vinyl, huh?
Yes. Oh yes. I still have probably 1,000 original vinyls.
Wow.
I know. Never getting rid of them.
Yeah. No, not now.
Yeah. And so I walked in the Navy recruiting office, and I was like, my dad was a radioman. And then he became an operations specialist, which I had no idea really what that was, but I didn't want to do anything like that. And it was in that moment of like, okay, I'm mad at the Marines. So maybe the Navy is an option. Cause I was like, I don't want to go to the Army, and I don't want to go to the Air Force.
Right.
And so, essentially because I knew nothing about those two. And so I talked to the Navy guy. I was like, I want to be a disc jockey. And I probably like recently saw Good Morning Vietnam and thought I was an amazing.
Sure, why not?
Right? Yeah, like what the heck? And so I was talking to him like, well, he goes, that's kind of not what radiomen do.
Yeah, that's not it's in the title, but it's not the job.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm like, well, then I don't want to join the Navy. I'm out. And
you walked out of that too?
And I started to walk out. And the guy's like, and the chief was like, wait a minute, hold on. He's like, come sit with me. And he's like, and I remember this vividly. I'm like, don't try to suck me into a contract, because my dad was in the Navy, and I know he tells me you guys lie to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, and so he was like, no, I'm just gonna talk to you. Not gonna force you to do anything. I'm not gonna lie to you. Ask me any question. And so I sat in his office for like an hour, and we just talked through like my life up to that point, and what I wanted to do. And he was a good salesman. That's for sure.
That's pretty good. He took the time to do that. Yeah.
And there was this other side of me who like, I'd always wanted to be like a firefighter or a doctor. And he was like, well, and he goes, and I told him what happened with the Marines and my uncle, just a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. And he's like, have you ever thought about being a corpsman? He goes, it's not a doctor, but it's kind of like a doctor, which it is,
Yeah.
and then he was like, he goes, so, and here's the cool thing. He goes, the Navy's medical team is the medical support for the Marines. He goes, so you could be stationed with your uncle. And I was like, where do I sign up?
Wow. That is so smart. That is great. He found your one thing.
Yeah.
And he used it. Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. But that was the time, that was 89, 90. And that
Were you graduated high school at this point yet?
No, I graduated high school. Did I graduate high school? I think I had graduated. Yes. Because it was like September of 90. So I just graduated. I had already graduated high school. I was 18.
Yeah.
And so
Oh, did you say 1990?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that was the time where everybody coming into the Navy had, on top of the ASVAB test, had to take the nuclear test because they had, the nuclear.
Cold War.
So, and if you got it, you got like a $25,000 cash bonus if you joined the nuclear program. And I missed it by like 2 points.
Oh, you're kidding.
And so I was like, because they were literally, if you pass the test, they put you in the nuclear field.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. And so I'm glad I'm glad I missed that. And so I ended up, joining and went to corps school and
did you go right away? Or did you delay entry or?
I went delayed entry.
Okay.
So I went in January of 91. And I remember being in boot camp and and the Gulf War started.
That's right.
Because we were in Desert Shield at that time.
Yeah.
And then Desert Storm happened. And I remember the drill instructors coming in and like it was somber and they turned on like military TV or something and we were watching the missiles got shot off of the Missouri.
Yeah.
And it was like a shift, so they're obviously in boot camp they treat you like crap anyway and for good reasons, but there was a shift in how they treated us. It was still there was still like this craziness about boot camp, but it was almost like we had a purpose.
Oh yeah, right. This is a real thing. We're not just training for it anymore. You may go.
Yeah, and it almost felt very like Full Metal Jacket-ish, in the sense of like like you guys, some of you, because my corps school was 12 weeks, and before even boot camp was out, they changed it to 8 weeks so that they could push people through quicker.
Well, and unbeknownst to us, it was a 100-hour war, that was it, right? So,
yeah, basically,
it was good enough to ramp everything up. So yeah.
Yes, and so that was my getting in story, if you will.
Where'd you go to MEPS at? Just right there in town, or? Oh,
yeah, it was like an hour away. I still remember that. That was the first time I'd ever like really been away from home.
Yeah,
with away from home with nobody that I knew.
Yeah, right. You're a completely stranger.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up super like conservative Christian, in the Midwest. Like yeah. I wasn't a good kid, but I was a good kid.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And
you had that background, and now all of a sudden there's no background anymore.
there's no background. No, it was all for one and one for all.
Yeah, isn't that weird? When you meet guys who are like, "Whoa, you're not going to be friends just because you don't want to be friends," It's like, it's a weird melting pot. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was crazy too because I was like, I wasn't a really strong kid. I wasn't like just, I was a little frumpy. I mean, I remember going from like 23% body fat to 12% body fat out of boot camp. I looked good when I got out of boot camp. Nice. But I was, I had been picked on a little bit in school and just wasn't, I hadn't really like really truly stepped into my assertiveness yet.
Yeah.
And I remember in boot camp, one of the, leads, this huge black guy from Alabama. And he was on me all the time, like would physically would push me in boot camp and stuff. And one day he said something to me, kind of gave me not even a hard push, like just a little push.
Yeah.
And I lost it. I turned around and I was like, and he's like 280. I mean, this guy was soft, and I just shoved him, knocked him to the ground, and I jumped on top of him.
Whoa.
And yeah, like out of nowhere, and like started wailing on him. And like 2-3 steps in, he just like grabs my arms, stops me, and like literally picks me up and sets me in front of him. He's like, I've been waiting 4 weeks for you to do that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, you need to come out of that shell of yours, and this is the only way out. And I was like,
yeah,
it was really cool. Like in retrospect, I was like, that was my first life coach.
Yeah, absolutely. You get pushed to that point where you just kind of do something uncharacteristic.
Yeah.
But that's what's needed sometimes, I suppose.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty neat that he said that. Yeah, that he was waiting for your response. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're actually still friends to this day.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. We probably chat once or twice a year, just via Messenger on Facebook, and like, hey, how's it going? How's the family? Kind of thing. And
that's pretty neat.
Every couple years, one of us will like, you remember that incident? I'm like, oh yeah. That was a game changer.
Did you tell him? I mean, you've obviously told him. Well, what'd you say to him? Did you say thanks? Did you say?
I think the first
didn't know what I needed until you told me what I needed.
When we first got connected, some years back on Facebook, I told him that I was like, you know what, that incident really like changed the trajectory of my life, and I just I appreciated that. And he was like, I remember that moment, and he's like, I remember you have something in you, but you just didn't know what your value was.
Sure.
And, but I saw it, and I was like, I just, it's my job. I like took it as my job to do that.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
And it was cool.
That is pretty cool.
So I think I'm still like friends with probably 8 or 9 guys I went to boot camp with that we talk to on a regular basis.
God, I wish I had done that. I wish I had the foresight to have kept in touch with those guys, but that's hats off to you for doing that. That's wonderful.
It was probably in a drunken stupor one night is when I started. I just pulled out my old Navy book. I was like, when Facebook was on, I'm like, oh, let me just search this guy.
Yeah, right. So you go to basic, you go to A school, all right there at Grand Lakes, right?
Yeah, Great Lakes, yeah.
Or Great Lakes, sorry. And then where was your first assignment?
Great Lakes.
But I mean, what was the unit? Your first assignment?
I had a really easy military career. I went to which is a story in and of itself. Just like a 30-second snippet is there was a time period where I actually was mad that I didn't have a more like robust career, and then then like 10 years past that, after I got out, then I've been like, I'm really fortunate that I had a easy career,
Sure.
And so I that was a piece that I had to let go of. But my first assignment was a clinic. I was a medical clinic in Great Lakes so Great Lakes is a training command.
Yeah.
So you had one side of it was the hospital and the Corps school, and then the other side was probably 80% of the Navy's unit, NECs, electricians and everything else was there.
Like the support folks for the base kind of thing.
Yeah. And so that's where I got stationed at for a couple of years.
Yeah. Were you a little bummed about that? It was like,
I kind of at first, and then it was kind of cool because then all my buddies from school would come up, and I would go home. I remember going home one weekend and throwing a kegger while my parents were on a mission trip in Mexico.
A kegger, I haven't heard that in a long time.
And it got busted.
Of course, right?
Of course, and I was only 20, and so I remember there was like 200 people in my home. And
wow.
and the the next door neighbor called, and the cops knock on the door, and of course somebody opens the door and sees police. Everybody starts running. They like corral everybody. There's 20 people in my house after that, maybe 25 people that they'd carouse in, and nobody, there's like one person looks over 21, so they're like, yeah. And they're like, okay, who's here over 21? And like all these people raise their hand. You could just see like the police were like bummed, like crap.
Oh,
like and so everybody showed them their ID, and of that there was 6 of us left that were not 21.
Yeah.
And it's my house, right? And he looks at me, he's like, whose house is this? I'm like, it's mine. I'm like, my parents, but it's mine. And he's like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm 20. He's like, have you been drinking? No, sir. I was 12 hours of vodka and Mountain Dew.
Oh my God.
And he's
at least
like,
you
good.
were alert. Yeah.
Yeah. He goes, good. You can drive down to the station behind me.
Wow. That was lucky.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay.
Wait,
and
drive to the station for your arraignment?
My own car. Yeah, for my arraignment. I could drive down.
God.
It was a smaller-ish town, but it was kind of, I still don't know why, but we went down to the station. Every single person that was there. So this one guy blows. So I went through, I had to do the breathalyzers at the police station, right? And I blow a .00.
Wow.
And yeah. So the life lesson there is vodka and Mountain Dew. You're good.
Wow. Apparently. Yeah, that's really good.
That's my unofficial life lesson there. But
maybe we shouldn't have the kids listen to this after all. So.
Maybe not. And everybody else that was there, I think the legal at that time was like a .08, and everybody was blowing like .02, .04. So nobody was legally drunk. And so, but because everybody had alcohol in the breath, they had 2 choices. They could either pay $50 or spend a night in jail. And every single person that was there had $50 on them.
Oh.
It was hilarious. So they had, and then I blew a .00, and he's like, just because you blew a .00, son, doesn't mean you haven't been drinking. And I was like, I was a smart ass, right? And I'm like, well, just because he blew a .04 doesn't mean he's drunk. One of the other,
come back. I like it.
Yeah, it was a good comeback. But so I show up on Monday morning and walked right into my CO's office in there, and I was like, we need to talk. He's like, what happened? And I was like, well, went home for the weekend, had a party, got busted, and told him everything that happened. And I was a good kid, and he was like, yeah. I'll tell you what, he goes, whatever the civilians give you, that will be your punishment.
Yeah.
And we'll just leave it at that. But if it happens again, and which it never did, yeah, but right. It was a good life lesson. It was a good lesson too. It was one of my first times that I learned, like, when you give effort at your job and you do it well, and you make a mistake, as long as you're doing your job well and you're honest about things, like you're not going to probably get in as much trouble as you think you would.
You can get a little grace there just by your performance. Yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty good. That's more integrity than probably 95% of the people at your rank at that time, especially when you were done with the cops. You weren't. Yeah. It didn't affect your job. You weren't late the next day. So
no. And the only thing that came out of that was I had 200 hours of community service, and I had to take an 8-hour alcohol class on the weekend. Yeah. And everything was done on the weekends. So it was,
all things considered, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. From there, I ended up going to Guam, spending 3 years on Guam.
Is that your next assignment?
Yeah.
So what were you when you went to Guam? What year? First?
I got there in 92.
What's your, since I don't know, and I probably should have done some homework on Navy ranks, which I've already asked you about. What was your rank when you went?
I think I was still in E3.
So you're in 3 years or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to about 3 years, right?
Yeah. In the 90s, that was normal. It just,
yeah.
You're
like an E3, you go out to Guam. That had to be, well, now you're seeing the world at least. Right?
Yeah. those 3 years in Guam, I mean, I was 20, 21, 22. Like that was the heyday of life
Oh
that was
yeah.
like college, right? Like
Yeah.
I consider that my college days. There was probably more stories that I can't tell on a podcast. And there was
Yeah.
like
Well, let's see. Did you get your? I'm sure you got a scuba certification while you're out there, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go. So, I hear it because we have there's a relay ground station out there, some other little stuff out there for the Air Force. So we hear.
There's Anderson Air Force Base, unless it closed down. I don't know if it.
I don't know. That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
I know it's not a big one. It's not. It's not.
Wasn't huge, but it had a really, really good beach bar on it, and
that part I didn't know. Really.
Yes. It was really cool going down there. Because it was like you had to come to the top of the island, and then go down a huge hill on one of the mountainsides to get to the base.
Yeah.
And it has my first wife. That's where I met my first wife. She was in the Air Force. Yeah. Which we lovingly called my first deployment.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, join the ranks. We've all got an X somewhere in there, it seems like. So, especially during that part of our 20s.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And you find somebody that's like, oh, we're having fun every night. This must be what marriage is like. Let's get married. And that's not what marriage is like.
No. I mean, do they have dorms out there, or did they have barracks
dorms out there? Yeah, they had dorms in there, and I mean, Guam's a fully functioning island.
Yeah,
It's basically, Guam to the Japanese is like Hawaii to somebody who lives in Idaho. It's a resort destination.
Yeah.
Of sorts. But a lot of cool things to do out there, and I did some more DJ work out there. I worked on the radio station for a little bit, and DJ'd at a country bar.
Country bar in Guam. Wow.
It was called the Lost Cowboy.
Perfect. Yeah.
Perfect name.
Yeah. How much more appropriate could you get? That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was cool. I mean, that's kind of where my disdain for the Air Force came in. I don't know.
That's fair. Yeah, let's go. Let's explore that.
It took me a while to get over it. Because we were medevacing. We had one of the time we were medevacing a 4-year-old kid, and we were medevacing in Hawaii, and the only plane that had going out was an Air Force plane. So we were giving them to the Air Force guys to take over.
Yeah.
And one of the kids that was holding the kids, who's probably my age, holding the monitor. The kid flatlined. The patient flatlined. Heart stopped, and the kid was just looking at the monitor. He's like, "Hey, doc." He goes, "This line's been flat for like a minute."
Oh no, jeez.
And so we ended up having to do CPR on the kid in the airplane on the ground. Wow. It never left the ground because he died in the aircraft. We coded him for an hour. Yeah. And it was like, we were like, the doc's like, okay, we need to call this. And the other corpsman and I are like, no, we're not calling it. It was really a tough one.
Yeah.
And I just remember coming off and just being angry.
Was the guy holding the monitor? Was he a medic in the Air Force?
He was an Air Force medic. Yeah. And he was young, first deployment, just out of his school, and got sent to Guam. And so, looking back, it's just water under the bridge and an event in my life to some degree. But in that moment, I was like, oh, I hate the Air Force.
Yeah, sure. Easy. Yeah. Easy.
Yeah.
Take one event, you can hate a whole branch, of course.
Right.
That makes more than enough sense. So.
Well, I mean, I do every year when the Army beats the Navy in football. So
I don't cheer for either one of those guys because those guys grow up to be officers and
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway.
That's the comment. I had somebody earlier today who was I was talking to, and he's like, to become a client of mine, and he's like, so how much is it? And I'm like, well, you were a prior officer, so that you get. He's like, oh, I get the officer pricing, right? I'm like, yep.
Yes, you do. That kid who died, was that your first ever patient that had passed that way?
It was.
No.
It was.
Yeah.
And so that was
how did that hit you? Did you have to go talk to anybody, or did you feel the need, or were you able to process it?
We did talk through that. I think what helped was literally we came down the ramp out of the plane. Like, I remember, like, I can remember it like it was yesterday, like just ripping our gloves off and throwing them down and just like cursing the moment, like that we couldn't save the kid. And his parents were in the ambulance, and the doc was down there talking to his parents about what happened.
Yeah.
And it coded on the, blah, blah, blah. And I remember we get down to the bottom, and his mom and dad, and they were pretty affluent members in politics on the island.
Yeah.
And I just remember the mom and dad coming up to us. There was 3 of us, and just like just bear hugging us and saying, thank you for everything that you did for our son. Wow. Like, we know, like, you did what you could.
Sure.
And we're grateful for that.
Wow.
And so I think that was probably the best thing that could happen mentally. Was to have that, like, acknowledgement right away from the parents.
Yeah. Cause if that had gone the other way.
Yeah.
It would be like, you let my son die. If that starts, then you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And they to the point where when they did a service for him, the funeral service for him, they recognized we were invited to the funeral service, and they recognized us as the medical team who did everything they could to save their son.
Yeah.
And so that kind of helped, like really, I'd say, squelch most of the traumatic stress from that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's good that happened that way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me more about Guam. Any more on that assignment?
I had a great time there. I mean, it's there was it was my first time ever in a strip club. Like, I love telling the story too, because it literally, again, we're in the 90s, we're overseas, and and so we had my buddy. I'm like, I'm not going. He's like, let's go to. We were at a bar, and ironically, all of the bouncers at this one bar were all Navy corpsmen.
Oh,
so it was kind of cool. Local bands would play there, other bands would play there, and so it was a happening spot. And across the street was a one of the strip clubs. And we're like, oh, we're all going over there. I'm like, no, you guys go. I'm gonna stay here. They're like, come on, Steve. I'm like, nope, never been into one. Not going into one. Not gonna do it. And my buddy literally grabs me, throws me over his shoulder like a duffel bag. Wow. Carries me across the street, puts me in a booth. He's like, we're going to hang out, and sits next to me so I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
He's like, we're going to have fun here. I was like, okay. I think I walked out about a year later.
With a bunch of phone numbers and a lighter wallet, right?
Yes. Yeah. Where did all my money go?
Oh my goodness. When did you, that wasn't like a 21-year birthday party or anything like that, was
it? No, it was just like a Tuesday night, I think. It's like, and I was just, I was like, I don't want to go. And then, it was funny. I had, gosh, there's so many, it's funny. We have just as many shore stories as we do sea stories.
Oh yeah. Hey, wait, now let me ask you this. How did that work? Your assignment in Guam was to a medical clinic, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, finish your question.
Do they slice you off for periods of time? Do you go out on ships? Or does the ships have their own assigned corpsmen?
The ships have their own assigned corpsmen. but the cool thing is out there when you're forward, kind of they considered it forward deployed because you're
Sure.
overseas duty.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing is there's a little bit of a lax of kind of, I would say, a little bit more bendable rules, you know.
Yeah,
so like, even though I was signed to the hospital, you know, I could find someone on the ship, which I did, and say, hey, you know, you want to come to the hospital, and I'll go to the ship for, you know, for 3 months, and as long as they weren't deployed, you know, going on their West packs.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time it was really cool. And
wow, that's pretty neat.
It was a unique time. I'll say it was a very unique time to be there, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and then also being overseas, like working. Yeah, I remember working in the ICU. I think statute of limitations is 25 years now. I think I'm okay to say this story.
Okay. Well, we'll see. That might get headlines inadvertently for the podcast, but let's go for it.
I mean, okay, we can always edit it out.
Sure.
Nope, sorry, we didn't have that on there. You know, we being overseas, you know, we had opportunities to do some medical procedures that only doctors were supposed to do with the docs there. Yeah. You know, so we were taught how to do you know, advanced like arterial line placements and wow, heart placements and things like that. And you know, and part of that is, you know, being deployed with the Marines, we would almost be doing that out there anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and in a war zone, you know, combat zone, nobody questions necessarily like whatever you do to save the guy's life. Like if you have to put in an A line, even though you're not a quote doctor, it doesn't matter. You can still.
That'd be that's one thing. At least, you know, they're not going to reverse course and go, now who put that in?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And so it was awesome to be able to learn how to do some of those procedures.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And have the experience. I remember one time we had a doc. This is the story that might have to get edited.
Okay.
Doc came in and said, you know, we had one patient in the ICU and there was 3 of us working one night, and he was like, don't call me. He's like, this is my anniversary. Don't call me. He goes, I don't care what happens. Don't call me. I'll come in the morning. And it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. The patient had a seizure, coded, like pulled out inadvertently to him, like just in seizing, pulled out all of his IVs, all of his A lines, his heart line, everything. It was crazy. And we just went to work, and we had a nurse and 2 corpsmen, and the nurse was a Mustang. So he was a prior corpsman anyway. And we just went to work and did everything that we needed to do, put the lines back in. And so got them all prettied up, and Doc walks in at like 6 a.m. and sees him sitting there, and vitals are stable and everything's, and he's like, quiet night. And we just took our doctor's notes and just kind of slid them over to the table and went, have fun reading this one, Doc. And he starts reading through it, and he's like, and it was commonplace for us to write doctor's notes anyway, you know, because there's teaching us how to do it. And he read through them, and he's like, why didn't you guys call me? Like, because you told us not to, Doc. Yeah, you told us not to. You taught us how to do everything. We know how to do it perfectly because you taught us perfectly.
That's pretty good.
And he was like, cool. And just, it was really cool because it was like that confirmation of like, you know, yes, there's procedures and protocols.
Sure.
But it for us, it was like this, I would say justification. That's not the word I'm looking for, but, not appreciation, but, oh man, what's the word? I'm a writer. Validation. Thank you. This validation that our training and what we can do actually can be done.
And even if you had called him, all that stuff that you did would have had to be done right then and there anyway. Right?
Would have had, yeah. And you
weren't going to wait for him to get in. So
the only difference would have been him saying, start doing it right now and start prepping it and getting it ready for me. And we would have called him back and said, he needs it right now. And he would have said, go for it. And
right.
And anyway, so.
Wow. That's pretty cool. You know?
Yeah.
And that's nothing that they can rate you a medal for because it was kind of outside the rules, right?
Yeah.
So it's like,
well,
you don't get nothing for this except the satisfaction that you're competent.
Yep.
Which is worth more than a medal anyway. So
To me it was. So that was fun. And then from there I went to Mare Island, which was in Northern California.
Well, now wait a minute. There had to be a re-up in there somewhere, right?
Yes, there was. So when I was in Guam, my 4 years came to an end, and I extended for a year.
Okay.
And then went to Northern California, and then re-enlisted.
Oh, so you re-enlisted out there. Okay, so that's what are we talking about? 96?
That was 95, 91. Yeah, it was 95.
95. You went to California?
I guess, you know what? No, my extension took me, 95. I went to California, and it was 96 when I came down to San Diego. So my first year in California, I was up in Northern California at Mare Island, which was a sub base that got shut down.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of that. Yeah.
At that point, it was really cool. There's a lot of history there. I got my first top secret clearance there.
Why'd you get a top secret?
It was a nuclear sub shipyard.
Oh, there you go.
And so we all had to have clearance to get on the subs.
Yeah, right.
And that has one of my favorite military stories, actually.
Okay, good.
So I was sitting for a sailor of the quarter board, and so this was 95, and this was right around the time where Congress wanted to change the rules and put women into combat roles.
Oh, I remember that. Sure. Yeah.
That was the hot topic, like,
Mm-hmm.
and you there was no like towing the line. It was either like you loved it or you hated it.
Yeah,
and usually the old guys hated it.
Yeah.
The old E7s, 8s, and 9s are like, no, women in combat, no. And I remember getting ready for the board, and the night before, my chief pulls me to the side. He's like, so this question's going to come.
Oh, no.
And you need to be ready for it. He goes, this will be the make or break question for who wins it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, how do I answer? He goes, I can't tell you. And he's like, you got to figure that one out on your own. And I can't give you one way or the other. I just know that it's an important hot topic right now in the military.
At least he gave you a heads up on it. So
yeah, I think most people had the heads up,
Yeah.
and but I remember sitting there, and the question came, and I tried like the night before to think of some, grandiose answer, and I'm like, no, that's stupid. No, that makes me sexist. Like, no, and so I was like, I'm just gonna go with whatever comes to my mind when they ask me the question.
Okay.
And so I'm like, what the heck, at least it'll be an honest answer.
Yeah.
And so I remember getting the question, and there was this E8 that was like on year 28, just kind of set back and just like, stroking his chin, and he's the one that asked the question. He's like, Petty Officer Leapley, he's like, most important question in the Navy right now is women in combat. What do you think about women in combat, and why?
Right.
There it is. Took a deep breath in. The first thing that came out of my mouth was like, well, Chief, I think it's a good thing. And he's like, I could just see the look in his face, like, boy, you better say something good or I'm going to smack you in the next week, And I said, the more women we send into combat, the less chance I have of going to combat.
Oh, shit.
That was the response I got from everybody. They busted up laughing. I ended up winning Sailor of the Quarter Board because of that.
Wow, that's great.
And it was like, it was the most honest, like perfectly politically correct answer that wasn't politically driven or motivationally driven by. It was just like, here's the reality of it.
No, you skirted it. You turned it all about self-preservation and avoided all the political stuff. That was smart.
Yes. And I didn't even know I did that until after the fact, really. And so it was just this beautiful, like, like we still talk about it to this day, my buddies and I, when we get on the phone sometimes. It's one of those just humorous things that it was an important thing. But yeah, like would, absolutely if the numbers came up and you're like, we're getting deployed, we would go because that's the job.
Yeah, of course.
But nobody wants to.
Nobody really. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody really.
I mean, you
wants
do
to
just as part of the commitment of swearing in and signing up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then there's the other side. It's like, I'd rather be back at the Guam strip joint, to be honest with you.
100%. That's how
That's pretty good. That just came to you. That is a moment in time. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
And it got you Sailor of the Quarter. So.
And it got me Sailor of the Quarter. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing.
Where was that? Where was that board at? Was that first? You said you went to. Was that at the sub base?
Yeah, that was up at Mare Island.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mare Island was its own kind of offshoot, but it was an offshoot of Naval Hospital Oakland at the time when Oakland was still open.
Oh.
When it was actually still a building, it's now been since destroyed.
Yeah, right.
But
a lot of California stuff has been, Brack did a number on all those stuff, all those bases out there.
Yep. I remember when we got the call that the base was gonna shut down.
Yeah.
And it got put on the list, which meant anything that happened wasn't going to get fixed because you're not part of the shutdown.
I've been part of many of those. My 10 years in the Army, it was like twice, and I was like, So we were at Fort Polk, and they moved our division out of Fort Polk, and then they moved in the Joint Readiness Training Center, and then they suddenly poured all this money into Fort Polk as we were walking out. And they're like, hey, how about all those condemned barracks over there? It's like, oh, we're fixing all those now. It's like, well, why didn't you when we were there?
Yeah.
Too low priority. So
right.
So yeah, I know what you're talking about. How about your re-enlistment? Did you do anything fun for your re-enlistment?
So I came down to San Diego and re-enlisted in San Diego. I re-enlisted in the back of an ambulance. So which was kind of fun. Although when I was up in at Mare Island, our chief our chief re-enlisted on home plate at Giant Stadium at what was then Candlestick Park.
Yeah, nice.
That was really cool. That was an amazing thing to do.
What was it at San Diego? This might be naive of me to ask, but was it just San Diego Naval Station there? Or Navy base?
When I came down to San Diego, so San Diego's got,
or do they have several?
They have several. They have there's the Naval Station, which is where all the ships are at.
Yeah.
And then there's Balboa Navy Hospital. And then there's North Island, which is for the aviation side of the house, which is where most of the planes are at and the air squadrons. And then there's the Naval Amphib Base just to the south of North Island, which is where the SEALs train.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot down here.
Where did you get assigned to then?
I initially got assigned to the branch clinic that was out there, at North Island.
Oh yeah.
And that was fun. I worked with a couple of nurses that I worked with in Guam, and so it was kind of in one that I had worked with in Great Lakes before I left. And so it's just a great, like almost like family reunion of sorts. And that's where I got a lot of experience. I went from the base there to the education and training department where I learned how to, that's where I learned how to really write curriculum. I had a really cool nurse who was our division officer who had a master's in curriculum in education.
Oh, wow.
And so she taught us how to write curriculum and let us write curriculum. And so that was a pivotal point when I turned into my business, which was
neat. That's a neat hand in glove kind of thing there, right?
Yeah. It was awesome. And then I went over to Balboa into the emergency room and ran the EMS department there. And that was right there where we were making the transition from the Navy corpsman running the ambulances, the 911 service, to the federal fire department, getting those guys trained as paramedics.
And you were training those guys?
And I was doing some of the training there. And so that actually led me into a job post-military. My first job post-military was working for the government, was a county government as in the EMS field. And so I was able to just basically do what I did in the Navy, but at a civilian job for 4 times the amount of money. And be home every night.
Yeah, right. I was going to say it was still a government job, but compared to the military pay, it was definitely more than that. So, well, let's get to that. So, San Diego was your last duty station. That's where you got out at?
Yep. Yes. And so so my getting out story. It's not a coming out story. It's a getting out story. I had orders to, I had 3-year accompanied orders to Okinawa with my wife, to go with a Marine unit.
Oh, jeez.
And so this was like about year 9. And so when I went we had a baby, we had our first child at that time. And, my wife had postpartum depression with it. And in those late 90s, they didn't have the facilities to, deal with that, with spousal problems.
No, that was not even considered yet.
Yeah. Did it come in your sea bag? No, then it doesn't go with you. Kind of.
Well, and we're not going to pay for it if you go outside. So
yeah. And so, in perfect military fashion, like, well, if you can't go for 3 years with your wife because she has a depression condition, we're going to send you 1 year by yourself.
Of course.
And I mean, that's
on a company tour with the baby and the wife being depressed. Oh, God.
Yeah. And so that stress, when I go to sign or to go to execute my orders and the weigh-in process with the Marines, they're, sticklers. I was like a half a pound overweight out of Marine Corps regs.
Really?
Yeah. And so
wait, your body or your gear?
My body.
So are you kidding? Really?
And so because I was out of the weight regulations, they stopped my orders, sent me back to Balboa.
Jeez.
That was on a Friday.
So you had already made the decision. You were going to go unaccompanied, right?
I was going I had to, because I was still, and I couldn't get out. So I had to go unaccompanied, and I had already walked through that, like, being angry at each other, their separation, because it's so much easier when you deploy angry than it makes no sense. But like that
it never gets any better. That's right.
No. And so that was on a Friday. I check into Balboa on a Monday and 3 pounds underweight. And so I looked at it as a blessing, honestly.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, careers are kind of won and lost on what seems like wistful decisions like that, or happenstances anyway.
Yep. And that's when I got out. Can you go ask your brothers to help you, please? Sorry, as a little 3-year-old.
Well, and that makes sense. And so, what were they offering you in counter to going to Okinawa? Or did you say that and I missed it?
There was nothing, because I'd been overseas and then I came back stateside.
Yeah.
And I think I was only back stateside like 96, 97, 98. So I guess I was three years or so stateside. And then they were like, you have to either go back overseas, but there's no place overseas we can send you. Because it was Okinawa or Okinawa.
Really? With all the places that the Navy has, that's all they had.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so, but again, like, I look at it as a blessing in disguise, and it was change the trajectory of where I was going. And
so they were like, find some place to go or, terminate, right?
Yeah. so we decided to get out, and I got out I remember July 7th. I got out, and and then right away.
What was that? 99?
2001.
Oh wow! So you went a little bit longer. Yeah.
Yeah. And
God, right before all that stuff happened, right?
And I got out and I joined the reserves because I was like, I spent 10 and a half years in, but let me at least do the reserves so I could try to get some retirement. So I joined a tank battalion. Down here, and I went to the first
Army or a Navy tank battalion.
Navy, no, Marine Corps tank battalion. It was 4th tank battalion.
Okay,
Marines don't have tanks anymore. They sold them all to the Army.
Well, we sold them used stuff anyway, so
out
of date stuff anyway. It's like, there you go.
We just gave it back to you.
You can have these old ones.
and so I went to my first weekend drill, and it was weird doing reserve stuff.
Yeah. It's not easy to get used to. That's true.
No, I was like if I'm going from active to reserves, like, this is just weird. It was like entitled people.
Yeah.
Now, to anybody who's listening who's full on reserves, I know it's not, but that was my perception at the time.
That's what I did right before I got out. 10 years in the reserves.
So you didn't do anything.
I was an active reserve, so it was different. But I know of what you talk about. So
yeah, and so I came home and I was really kind of like almost disgruntled about it, and just like because it just didn't feel right. And so my wife said, you know what, either go back in full time or get out and just end it here. And that was my last official day in the reserves was September 4th, 2000.
Oh my God. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so, and then of course, September 11th happened.
Right.
And I remember my wife calling me one time, I don't know, 6-8 months after that. And, just crying hysterically. And she's like, somebody from the Navy called and they said, you have to report back and you're going to deploy. And I was like, no, I'm pretty confident I don't have to do that.
You weren't in, they didn't put you in IRR or anything like that?
Well, the IRR only goes to 8 years. So you just.
Oh, so after that, you had no commitment. Yeah.
After 8 years, you had no commitment. So I was at 10 and a half when I got out of active. Right. And so I remember calling the chief and he was like, Petty Officer Leapley, you got to come back in. And, I was like, no, I don't, Chief. He's like, we've got a war going on. We're losing corpsmen. You have to go. And I'm like, no, I don't. He's like, you ever heard about a thing called IRR, son? And I was like, Chief, did you even check my record? Like, I did 10 and a half years. IRR ends at 8. And he was like, well, we need you to come back in. And I said, well, there's only 2 reasons.
He was done. Right.
Yeah. He's like, I'm like, there's only 2 ways I'm coming back in. Either the president signs a draft notice, that I have to come back in, or my wife says yes. And my wife said no. So unless the president calls you and says, you get to call me, don't call me here again.
Right. What I was amazed during that time, we did a story on reserves and guard. But I didn't realize how many Guard and Reserve were activated during that time, and it was a lot. And I was like, "Wow!" Yeah. I guess I never realized it. But they ran the numbers, and I was like, "Holy cow!" I didn't realize there were hundreds of thousands of Reserve and Guardsmen that were put on active duty orders. So,
yeah,
so amazing. Any formal send off, or was it just last day of wearing a uniform, next day that was it? Or did you have a ceremony or anything? They hose you down or anything like that when you were getting out? You know what I mean?
I know. I had my own, quote retirement party. It's like, I know we threw a party when I got out,
yeah.
But it was, and we stayed in the area because when I got down here, I had met my wife and she was San Diego native, so I was like,
oh, okay, perfect.
I'm never leaving. Yeah. I'm never leaving San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like I remember my mom calling me one time, like February, like, are you guys home? I'm like, well, first of all, Mom, I am home, but, but, I'm like, what's the weather? And she's like, well, it's, 3 below, 30 below with the wind chill, but it's February. I'm like, Mom, I'm in shorts.
Especially during that time. It's funny. I got out of the Army in 98, and I remember being there in 97, or late part of 97, going to a job conference in San Diego. And it was, Super Bowl was there, I think beginning of 98 or 97. I can't remember what it was, but I was like, God, San Diego's beautiful. It's just wonderful.
It's crazy now, but
it's changed just a little bit, but still, I don't know. I of all places, I mean, we've gone there, every 3 or 4 years just to take 3 or 4 days because it's wonderful.
Nice.
But I don't know if I want to live there, but I don't know if I could afford to live there, to be honest with you. And you're still there, right?
I'm still here. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So now, how do we get to Steven Leapley LLC?
Well, that's another hour.
We could do that if you'd like. I mean, I'd love to give you the opportunity to.
It won't take me that long, maybe 2 hours. I got out and was working civilian sector in the EMS divisions, and I got to a point where my ego got really bad.
Yeah.
I remember all my friends like having these nervous breakdowns when they turned 30, like, oh, now I have to actually be an adult. And I was like, that's never going to happen to me. Never going to happen to me. I waited till I was 33 before I had my.
Good. You fought it off. Yeah,
I did. I kept it at bay for 3 more years.
Or maybe you just made it more intense when it finally did hit.
Yes, I'll say that. And it was actually a really, really dark season for me, and ended up in a rehab for 7 months.
Oh no.
And almost lost my family, and grace of God I didn't. But when I came back out of that, I went back into the medical field for another company, and I just realized after a couple of months, I'm like, if I stay back in the medical field, I'm going to be right back where I was in no time, in throes of addiction. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Do you think it was the nature of the work?
Partly.
Okay. Yeah.
Partly. Like what is that movie line from Clue is like, war's hell, peacock. Something like that. It's like it puts a man through a lot of changes, or maybe that was weird science. I don't know. It's probably weird science.
Yeah, maybe.
That was weird science. Yeah, it was Anthony Michael Hall. He's like, you were a black man in Vietnam. I'm like, well, the war puts a man through a lot of changes.
Very good reference. Yeah.
And so I stepped out of medicine, kind of just officially retired from being a paramedic, and went into corporate training. And I remember sitting down for that interview, and the lady interviewing me, who became my boss, she said, why are you changing careers? And she's like, you're getting out of the medical field, going to retail. I'm like, why are you changing careers? And again, those first thing that come to your mind moments.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not changing careers, I'm just changing venues. She was like, I don't understand that. And I said, well, if as a paramedic, I roll up on an emergency scene. I have about 30 seconds to determine, if the scene's safe, if the guy's, has a weapon on him, is he mentally stable? Is he bleeding to death? Like, all these different things that can happen. It's the same thing when somebody walks into as a customer. I went to work for Kinko's, and like, I was like, you walk in, you have 30 seconds to know if the guy's happy, sad, mad, he's mad at us. And she was like, that is so true.
Yeah, you do your assessment, and then you decide on a course of action and you go, right?
Yep. And so
Yeah,
I did
another good answer. That's really good.
and so I did that until 2008 when the economy was crashing.
Oh yeah, eight and
when
nine. That was bad.
when that happened, the first thing that goes in a company is all the ancillary services like human resources. Training
Sure.
goes out the window, and so I got let go there, and I decided, well, it's now's a good time to use my GI Bill. So I went back to school.
Oh, okay.
In my 40s, and went back and got my associates, my bachelor's, and my master's. Basically,
Did you get the pay for attending the school?
I did. So
Okay.
essentially my bachelor program got paid for.
Yeah, yeah.
And then and
Did they give you the stipend on top of that? Because there's some instances where you can get it, and I can't remember.
no, because that was the post 9/11 GI Bill had the stipend.
Oh, so you used the older one, right?
Yeah, I was
Okay.
part of the Montgomery GI Bill, the
Yeah,
original,
Yeah.
the original crappy one. I was getting there. It was a blessing. And so we went back to school and for a few years, and that got us into
What was your
to,
degrees in? I'm sorry.
my bachelor's is in theology and
Oh, nice.
in Bible and biblical studies,
Yeah.
and then my master's is in counseling psychology.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, I came out because we were gonna originally, my wife and I were thinking about starting a church, and then coming out of that I didn't want to do that, and it was there's more to it than that, but it's we just went off in a different direction.
Yeah.
And
Right.
but when we were in our bachelor's program, our last semester or so of our bachelor's program, were online classes.
Okay.
And so my wife had this great idea to throw everything in storage and go on an RV trip. We had 5 kids at the time.
Wow. Jeez.
And it's like, this is the only time we're ever going to be able to do this. We have enough money to do that, and then we'll come out and then we'll figure out what we're going to do after that. And so we did that for a few months. Ended up in Ventura County for a couple of years.
What year was this?
This was 2012, 13.
Okay.
I'm going to say 12, 13, 14, right in there.
Yeah.
And so we up there for a little bit, and then with the GI Bill, we took out some loans just to live and kind of just, so I didn't necessarily need a full-time job at that time.
Nice.
But
Good.
it was still crazy. I mean, I kind of regret that time, but I don't. It would have made some different financial decisions, but
Wow.
we all have seasons like that.
Sure.
And so
But maybe it's a pathway
It's-
to how you got to where you are now. So
it is a pathway to where, I look at it that way 100%.
Yeah.
And so we ended up coming back down to, so we made our way from Huntington Beach, or from Ventura County back to Orange County, for a year, back to San Diego County, where I was in a rock band
jeez.
for about a year. That was fun.
I bet. Yeah.
That was a good time. And but during
Still all
school,
in the RV, right?
No, we spent, that was the first time we just spent a couple months in the RV before we hit
Okay.
Ventura.
Then you just hit
then
apartments from there, and
back into houses or apartments, and then we came back down after the band. The 2 houses that we lived in, post that was like 16, 17. We both of the houses we were in flooded. Had
jeez, you're kidding.
and so after the second one, my wife was like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this. I don't want to do this. Can we go full time in an RV? And up until then, it was old school RVs with no slide outs, no rooms, and I'm an only child, and I need my I need my space. And it's like I'm selfish like that. It's
hard to breed out of you. Yeah, that's for sure.
It really is. It really is. And so we compromised. We bought a brand new 36-foot travel trailer with 4 slide outs and a bunkhouse for all the kids to be in on one side of the bedroom and the other side for us, and then a nice big living room kitchen area.
Is that a fifth wheel or is that a full all?
It's a travel trailer, so it's like a fifth wheel, but like a bumper pool.
Yeah. All right.
And so we've been in that since 2017.
Wow. Amazing.
And and that's really cool. At one point, we had all 7 of our kids in there for a very short season. But now I have three out of the house, so I only have 4.
Yeah.
4 only 4 left
compared to where you were. Yeah, that's
it's
getting easier and easier.
It is, and so we did some traveling. We did a cross country trip in it, and had a lot of fun, and just went into a couple of different private lands. And so that's kind of where we are now, is on private lands. And so now I'm in my RV, in my travel trailer on a private land, and now we have a farm. You
own a farm?
I've got like 70 chickens and 5 goats and and 13 dogs right now, but my dogs just had puppies. So,
oh geez.
And so we have, that's kind of how that's what we have now. But back up real quick. While we were in school, I was editing my wife's papers, and and I was just good at writing and such like that. And so I remember she came to me one time and had a 10-page paper that was due, and she's like, "I'm done writing." And she writes like she writes like she talks. So she'll just like writes it all out, and then she's done. And so she gives me a paper, and she says, "I need you to edit this for me." And I was like, "Okay, how many pages does it need to be?" And she says 10. And I looked, and it's 4 pages. And I was like, "Well," I'm like, "Honey, you got to write some more." She's like, I'm done writing." It's like, "Just turn it in." I'm like, I can't do that. Like, it's got to be at least 9, at least come in at like a page under if you want to. Yeah. And so that was like my first unofficial ghostwriting gig, was right there, was writing the rest of her paper. And because I know her, I know how she thinks and processes things. So it was really easy for me to write as her.
Wow. What insight you got from that that's led to what you're doing now.
And so that's kind of how it got me to writing. And we were getting ready to do our cross country trip. A buddy of mine needed some copywriting. He's like, "Well, you need a way to fund your trip." He's like, "Why don't you just come work for me and I'll help fund your trip?" And so I've worked for him for about 4 years. And so he helped fund that first piece of the trip. And then cut my teeth more and more. And then just started, got a couple more clients, and really just word of mouth, and I did really good work. And so that's how I kind of got into copywriting. For a while. And then this last year, I made the decision because I got kind of burnt out, because a lot of the copywriting includes social media, and I'm just, that's having done it for a long time, I'm like, I'm so done. It's important, but I was just done with managing social media accounts. And so,
I would imagine it gets a bit repetitive, and and demands a lot of your time, because you always have to be on there, right?
Yep. And so that's when I switched over to ghostwriting, and focusing primarily on books and blogs, articles, and some special projects, one-off projects here and there, that I get to pick. And that's, and I just fell into this niche of the last 2-3 books that I've worked with are all veterans. And so that really and so they're kind of like, have you who Jocko Willink is?
Sure. Yeah.
So he wrote the Extreme Ownership book, and so that's kind of like this style of how most veteran entrepreneurs write. Anyways, like you have the story, or entrepreneurs in general, really, you have the story, and you use that to somehow relates to your business, in some way.
Right.
So it's like
Right.
threading that needle to say, you should hire me for this because here's my story and I
Sure.
overcame it, kind of thing. And
Battlefield to the Boardroom is the classic example, right?
yeah,
You know.
yep. And in this last book that I just finished, um, the guy and I were talking, and he's like, and he goes, writing this book did so much more for me to get rid of my PTSD than any therapy or counseling I ever did.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's when it really hit me. I was like, okay, I'm I'm feeling where the kind of the niche is at, of
Yeah.
just helping guys write. And one of my clients called me the Jim Carrey of copywriting. And because I just embody the,
Oh, okay.
going back to, like, with my wife, like I just embody the person that I'm writing for.
Huh.
And in my military career, my
Well, at
paramedic
least you can
career.
speak the language. Yeah,
Yeah.
that helps. And you can relate to them on that level, whereas just a straight civilian guy probably fails in that respect.
Yes.
At least to try to get in touch with what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is
Wow.
my passion is just, I want to help as many vets who are entrepreneurs, like, just help them get their story out there, because we all have the
Sure.
story.
Yeah.
We all have a story. um and and sometimes we don't feel like our story is important, and and some of them can be used, for business. Some of them can be used, just to write your story as a legacy for your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't always have to be for necessarily for a profit.
Right.
But it's
Right.
but it's important, I think, for guys to just to share their life. It's really cool to like sit and listen to people tell their stories, and help them articulate that, and get it on paper. And and it's fun because, as obviously as time goes by, our memories kind of wean a little bit,
Sure.
and then you get something written down, and you go back through and you reread it, some time later, and you're like, those stories, those memories kind of started to come flooding
Yeah.
back in.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh, we need to add this, and this is what happened. And
One thing leads to another kind of thing, right?
yes, next thing you know, you're in the strip club forever.
How does it work when you meet somebody who is willing to work with you? How long do you have a certain amount of sessions that you have to do? Do you have to spend some time to get to know the person, that kind of thing? Is there a formula that you use, or is it just kind of, hey, let's start talking and see where it goes?
It's not a formula yet, because there's a framework, but there's not necessarily a wash and repeat formula that I use.
Right.
In there is, as far as like framing out your story. There I have a couple of templated documents that I use to kind of ask the right questions to kind of get the information
thinking.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that usually, every client's different.
Sure.
There's a lot of similarities there. So I have some who like, I want to be on the phone with you 2 hours a day, a couple of days a week, and walk through everything. I'm like, okay, that's cool.
Okay.
And then others I get down, and usually a couple of sessions we start talking, and just I always record, like recording a podcast. I record it, and then go back and re-listen to it a couple of times, and really pull out the nuggets from it. And
Okay.
and just my experiences and my knowledge, and my everything that I've been through. I feel like I'm blessed into a place where I'm able to like connect. I can find a connection with somebody, and really like jump into it, and explore it, and feel like I'm a part of what they've been a part of. It's weird. It's kind of freaky in some ways, but but on the other side, I'm like, that's a cool gift that I have.
It's great that you're able to recognize it, because a lot of times you don't, but you're able to recognize it and channel it and do some good for some other people. That's wonderful. If somebody's interested, how do they reach out to you?
The best way is LinkedIn, because I'm super active on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, wow!
Yes.
I've been told I should put my stuff out on LinkedIn.
You should. It's still, even though there's some aspects of it that are Facebook-y, it's still a really good business professional platform.
Sure. Sure.
So I'm on LinkedIn and it's just my name, Steven Leapley, and I have a website, LeapleyEnterprises.com. But that's if anybody's interested, that's I'm always I love connecting. My wife is like, it's like, hey, you'll connect with anybody. You're like, oh, how'd you meet this guy? Well, we're having a conversation in the bathroom last week. Like, oh, now we're best friends on Facebook. So it's like,
my wife has that ability. I'll be waiting for her outside of the car as she's checking out, and she'll go, hey, I just met, and she'll give me a whole rundown. I was like, you were only in there for 5 minutes in that line. Well, we started talking, and I was like, how did that come up? She goes, I don't know. We just started talking. So maybe you got that ability too.
I'm pretty sure I do.
So. Well, I know when you called me out of the blue, or when you emailed me and then we talked. You're very easy to talk to. There's no barriers that I feel that I have to run over to try to get a conversation with you. So that's a testament to your ability.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Former Navy Petty Officer Second Class Steven Leapley, now owner of Steven Leapley Enterprises LLC, right?
Yep.
Thanks for your story. It's been a privilege. I love hearing about it. Thanks for honoring the podcast by coming on and telling me all about yourself.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Marty.
Thanks. On behalf of Petty Officer Second Class Leapley, I'd like to thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please leave a like and a comment and share the podcast with someone else. And as always, make sure to download the next episode for more service origin stories. So until next time, Attach! Whoo! Fall out!